Once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latex gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Drunk Turkey Show. Today, we're going to be talking about the most recent and first hearing and appearance of Bryan Kohberger in Ada County. He appeared today in front of Judge Steve Hippler. I believe his first name was Steve. And I thought that the hearing was quite interesting. We'll go through what was said, you know, kind of the highlight, the main parts, talk a little bit about them, and then we'll go through some perspectives and from the victim's family members and thoughts, my thoughts as well on what's to come and this judge. So I want to thank everybody that's here. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell if you haven't already done so. We'd appreciate that. So let's start it off. So today, what was it? September 26th at about 2 p.m. local time there in Boise, Idaho, Bryan Kohberger appeared in Judge Hippler's courthouse. And there was a few things that were stated. First and foremost, Hippler made his presence known early and often. He started off by saying, you know, I'd say I'm happy to be here, but I don't want to start this out with an untruth or something very similar to that. And, you know, I think he just kind of, I feel like he's more in control of this situation. Now, there has been some, you know, arguments going back and forth between the prosecution and the defense as to when they're going to start. And I think that was one of the biggest issues that was coming in was the start of this trial. Now, I thought, being honest, that the moving from one location to another would delay the hearing or the trial process. But in fact, it seems like Hippler wants to actually move the trial up to May. And so I was pretty I was excited about that, to be honest with you, to get it started in May, go through the month of May, June, July, get it up, you know, get it going earlier than later. It was, to me, I thought it was a tactic always that you know, BK was trying to extend this as long as possible, which I also thought was kind of weird, right? Or not weird, but funny on the defensive side when they were talking about an expert of theirs and how their expert wouldn't be ready until the end of April. March was too soon, but the end of April was more like it when the judge wanted to do the trial in May. And the prosecution said, hey, man, we can't, if they're going to get that kind of deadline from the end of April to the beginning of May when this trial is going to start, we're not going to have enough time to, you know, build the case against this expert. So another tactic, you know, from the defense team trying to get a leg up instead of actually trying to say, hey, you know, this is where he was at or whatever the case may be. They're trying to pull these, you know, pull the rug out of underneath the prosecution. It's not usually an argument an innocent person would make, but, you know, I don't think he's innocent. And so I digress. So the other situation that would have occurred was that Bryan Kohberger appeared, as you can see in the picture here, he appeared in street clothes or in a suit. Now, when the judge, he had filed an order, I think it was yesterday, and the day before the hearing on September 26th, and he stated that that he was going to grant the the suit or whatever, the street clothes thing for this hearing only. And then they discussed that they would have another hearing later after he talks with his with the transfer deputies and plaintiffs. And so excuse me, so bailiffs, I'm sorry, not plaintiffs. So the transportation bailiffs, and they're going to talk about their safety, which is the most upfront and most important thing, is making sure that they're safe and everybody else is safe here. And I mean, this is just my assumption here. I don't know any bailiff or deputy that's going to be like, yeah, let's side on letting this man who's alleged to have committed a quadruple homicide to wear a suit to these hearings where there's no jury that is going to be tainted by the sight of him wearing an orange jumpsuit, right? I don't think he's going to win that argument when it comes down to the when it, you know, everything ends up coming out. I think he's going to end up I think he's going to lose a lot of things, you know, when it comes to the way things are going. In fact, you know, Judge Hippler had stated when Ann Taylor mentioned, you know, something referencing they had some motions of compelling that he wasn't going to do the 14 days stuff, that he was going to hear things. He told her that, you know, he understands, you know, timelines and things of that nature, but March isn't, you know, right around the corner. It's a few months away. And it seems like he's saying that he feels that there's enough time. I think he might actually end up pushing for a May hearing and getting a lot of these meaningless, you know, hearings that we've been seeing out of the way and get this thing going. You know, I've said it before. I think that this is one of those situations where Bryan Kohberger can be like, man, maybe I shouldn't have wanted to leave Latah County, because it sure did seem like he was getting a lot of his way, you know, out there in Latah County. Judge to me seemed pretty but kind of weak. I'm not gonna lie. It seemed kind of weak. Seemed like this was over his head. And, you know, I think so far when it comes to Judge Hippler, I like his presence. I like his demeanor. I like his control of the courtroom. I mean, in the beginning, he started off telling them, basically, you're going to behave. It's crazy that he has to say this, but he told them both, prosecution and defense, that you have to behave. And even kind of threw in a little bit of the threat of, you know, or going back and reciting them to, or reminding them of their oath, right? And to the bar and all that other stuff. I'm not a lawyer, but basically to me, it sounded like, hey, you get out of hand, you start doing all these things. The theatrics, I think, is one of them, which we've seen a lot of them from one side. I think that, you know, he's not going to tolerate those type of things. So I'm actually very thrilled that this judge is who ended up being the judge in charge. I think it's unfortunate that it has to be so far away, especially when it comes to like the, you know, the victim's family members trying to get out there. You know what I'm saying? It's a long distance, you know, people, I've seen some ugly things being said, like on certain Facebook groups and stuff like that. And people just talking out of their rears, you know, just because, I don't even know, you know, targeting people that they shouldn't be targeting, and not really understanding, you know, what a toll, you know, emotionally, everything is going to be, physically, financially. I mean, you know, I think they're expecting this to be like a 3-month trial. And, you know, you're going to expect an entire family have to get up, move, have to pay for their, whatever they're going to be at, food, expenses, electricity, like everything, the whole 9 yards. And it's not like their other bills just stop too. Right. And if you're not working, it's not like you're going to be getting paid too. Right. You know, how many days have they already taken off because of, you know, this hearing? You know, we don't know those things. So I just think that some of this, you know, misguided stupidity and it's pointed towards them is just ridiculous. I digress. I want to say thank you real quick to Canadian True Crime Bureau for coming in with a gifting 5 Drunk Turkey Show memberships. And then we have Nina Drew with a 99-cent super sticker. Thank you so much. I saw this BK looked pissed. I think he did too. I think he realized be careful what you wish for. So you just might get it. I think he was getting a lot of things back where in Latah County that maybe even giving more privileges than he should have been. And I'll get into, I'm gonna get into that a little bit later, but that's going to be something that we're going to touch about is the privileges that he had already. And then we see a motion that Ann Taylor's having to make in Boise, referencing him wearing street clothes, asking for that motion to be granted. Well, where was that court hearing in Latah? And if that was some sort of behind the back, agreement or outside of court proceedings, what other agreements were made? So I am very much in favor that this is no longer in judge's hands. I want to say thank you, Florence White, for your 9-month membership. Thank you so much for that. 1 second. Serious Black comes in with a $5 super chat saying prayers for the Goncalves family. Yes, prayers to them. They're going through a lot of backlash from just the most heinous of people. I mean, these people are ruthless. They don't you never want to wish anything upon anybody. And these people just don't understand. They don't. And I don't know some of these people think that they're actually involved in this, that they're some sort of detective. It's ridiculous. But thank you, Sirius, for your donation. And prayers not just to the Goncalves family as well, to the Chapin family, to the Mogen family, and to the Kernodle family, and her extended family. That also was, I think a few of these the victims had parents and step parents and things like that. So they're all going through quite a bit. Nobody wants to be in their shoes. And I just don't understand how people who don't want to be in there, who haven't been in those type of shoes, can just have these type of just say these ignorant things. It's ridiculous. But anyways, let's move on from that. So the non-dissemination order was going to stay in place there. So the gag order is not going to be changed. Let's see. There was apparently a vast amount of discovery since August that has been turned over, according to Ann Taylor. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was like 360 something bytes of something. Apparently, it's quite a bit. At the end of the towards the end of the hearing, the prosecution came forward and said that the evidence that they had handed over was a FBI, I'm not sure if she said OneDrive or thumb drive, one of the two, from the FBI, and that the evidence had been there. This is just the evidence that they already had, but maybe perhaps from a different aspect or a different way of grabbing that evidence. So I'm assuming we remember there was this thumb drive that had the videos of the the red coffee house and all that other stuff that was on the thumb drive that Ann Taylor was wanting the prosecution to go in there and find for her, and that she talked about where it was. I'm assuming that's the thumb drive that they turned over. And she said if there, she can't speak to if there's anything new in it at all, but it didn't sound like, according to the judge himself, even said that it didn't sound like the there was gigabytes. Then it didn't sound like the judge was too keen on it. But yeah, man, let's see. I saw something that kind of social media connection was in the 400 gigs. Interesting. That's an interesting thought. Could it have been that That could be, that was the other thought, is if there was new things that were out there, could that have been what was there? It's possible. It is possible. It is from August, but, to me, it said that it was the FBI OneDrive. So I don't know, maybe the FBI did, find the connection between Kohberger and the victims through social media, and it's in there as well. That's quite possible. That was a good point that you brought up there. I appreciate that. Let's see. And so those were the things that were brought up there. Let me see. So Ann Taylor disclosed that an expert of theirs has passed away, and that this expert, they have not yet disclosed to the prosecution who they were, just that they had disclosed to the prosecution that there were some health-related issues. They did not want to talk about who she was in front of the prosecution because that would kind of, I guess, give away her, plan of attack, or how she plans to attack the prosecution or defend her client. And, there's a deadline, and they're trying to cut this deadline very close to the time that trial starts. This is the one I told you guys earlier, where they're like, she's doing the work, she's getting the work done by the other, that the other expert, couldn't finish or was doing or replicating. I don't know how far that other person got into the work or what kind of work it was, but apparently they're thinking that this expert can't get it done by March, but can get it done at the end of April, right before the trial is expected to start in the eyes of, or where Hitler wants it to start. Again, he wants it to be started in May. Expert was a mitigation witness for if there is a DB conviction. I thought, maybe they said mitigation. I thought they said litigation, but I could be wrong. It may have been mitigation, but when I was hearing it on the first time I heard it, the feed was like, I don't know if anybody else had this problem, but the feed was like super low. Couldn't hear anything. And I had to put it like on speaker on my phone and have it like right up to my ears. And so, if it was mitigation and it has something to do with the DP, I don't know. I don't know if you would be getting that stuff, that close. But maybe. I don't know. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not an expert. I don't. So maybe you can. That is cutting it pretty close there. Let's see. Now it seems like after the defense basically stated that they were thinking that their expert witness would be ready to go by the end of April. The prosecution stated that they wanted to get it, probably look at this into September then, because it would be too close to trial to try to, build I don't want to say a defense to their defense, but build and also vet what this expert is saying. Maybe get an expert to, do the same type of experiments to see if they, match, those type of things. So, that was one of the things that was discussed. So I put in my notes here that I think it's probably going to start in September, but then again, Ipler was very adamant that he gets things moving, and he says you kind of notice that I'm going to be getting. I don't wait 14 days, and in fact, I think he ended up having the ex parte hearing. This was the hearing to kind of tell the judge why they needed the extension to the end of April on the expert, and what's going on and why they need that without the prosecution there. And, he wasn't ready to say, all right, next week. And Taylor was like, oh, we're getting on a plan. He's like, all right, we'll do it today after X amount of time. So I'm not sure what was the results of that, but that came up as well. Let's see. Yeah, here I wrote down litigation expert. So it could have been mitigation. So yeah, but the prosecution wants the ex parte hearing. Okay, so yeah, the judge ended up saying we can end up doing we can end up just setting it up for September if you'd like, or we can do an ex parte, figure out how necessary that timeline is, and if it can be brought up earlier, and a deadline of a earlier date than the end of April can be made on the expert from the defense, who is the one who has replaced. I'm not sure if the other expert passed or if somebody in their family, a family member of theirs passed. But oh no, yeah, Texas Ranger. You'd be surprised to know I might actually be watching that on the side here too. Sorry about that. Well, anyways, yeah, so they basically, the prosecution said, no, we want the ex parte. We don't want to wait to September. If there's a possibility that we can get this done in May and get this thing rolling, let's do it earlier. Prosecution seems very confident in their case, which is like, when we go back to everything, right? And we go back to Bryan Kohberger getting arrested. He people ask, why didn't they question him? Why didn't they bring him in? Why didn't they question him and do something like that? And the reason is they didn't need to. How many times, this is probably one of the things that are in, TV shows and in movies that are real, is if they had enough evidence, when somebody gets brought in and they're doing questioning and the comment comes up, if he had enough evidence to arrest me, he would have arrested me and I wouldn't be in in this meeting right here talking to you. So they're trying to get more evidence out of me, that way they can build a case. Their case isn't strong enough without me saying something. So the mere fact that they didn't need to do that is more evidence that's more logically, you can logically deduce that the outcome of that is more likely, because they had a lot of evidence, even at that time, against Mr. Kohberger that made them, believe and get a grand jury to also agree that Bryan Kohberger had allegedly committed these murders. And so thank you, Extreme Blonde, for coming in with another gifted Drunk Turkey Show membership. We appreciate that. Let's see. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, just kind of put those three dots in front of it, and that way it kind of catches my eye a little bit. Another 398 gigs of evidence. The defense said that they will only need 4 weeks for his defense, but the prosecution said they need 6. That's how much evidence that they have. That is true. That's true. That's true. That's a lot of evidence. And again, going in and arresting him without having to do any type of interrogation is usually, that's usually a sign that they have a lot of evidence. The fact that the defense needs so much time to combat the prosecution's evidence is usually another sign that there's a lot of evidence. Usually a sign of a lot of evidence points to somebody being guilty, but we'll get there when we get there. Let's see. Iona Pair comes in with another gifted Drunk Turkey Show membership. Thank you so much for that. Let's see. 007 ICU. They did interview him, though. It's in the documents that FBI agent Shirley interviewed him, and also Payne interviewed him. The defense requested the recordings and videos if there was any, right? Yeah, that came out already. We know about when that happened. That happened after his arrest. So, like I said, there's a difference here. If they're going to talk to him, but if you're going to talk to him before you arrest him, that usually means you don't have that much evidence. You arrest him first, it's usually an indication that you have quite a bit. And so that's just the mere fact behind that. Now, and that's what I'm trying to point out. Did they talk to him? Yeah. Remember, they were asking him some questions. He said something to the effect that, yeah, of course, I know about the murders happened 10 miles away from me or something like that. And then, I think that was also when he was asked, or when the question came up, that is, did anybody else get arrested? And then also, when they kept asking him more about his location, he tightened up and said he wanted a lawyer. So, yeah, that we know about. What I'm referencing is, did they interrogate him prior or after his arrest? If it's the interrogation came before, that usually is evidence that the case isn't as strong. If it came after, it's usually a case of that the evidence is very strong. Okay. So all in all, I'm very, pleased with what I saw today, in court. It seems like this judge is going to be moving this pretty quickly. So, one of the things that I wanted to also bring up and talk to you guys about is when it goes back to the suits and the ties and stuff like that and the street clothes. I did talk with Steve not too long ago, and I got an idea of, their perspective of things and why perhaps this is an issue, right? It's more than just the suit. And in fact, that's exactly what he had told me. The issue is that in Idaho, let me put this up because I wrote this down here. So in Idaho, under Idaho law, victims have an elevated rights and access concerning the processing of their cases. And so basically what that means is they're notified first of any type of court hearings, cases, things of that nature, right? Before it's ever publicly put out there. And so at least that's what the law is. Now, I can't tell you whether or not they were getting those things or not, but one thing that they noticed was they didn't see any, or they couldn't find a hearing or an order or anything referencing the court to approve Bryan Kohberger to wear a suit at courts. Now, Brian Enton spoke about today how Bryan Kohberger was brought in handcuffed and was uncuffed there in front of everybody. Now, that he also said that that was the only time he's seen that. He has not seen that in Latah County, that they were treating him much differently in Latah County. So the problem with this, and if we go back to today, as I mentioned at the top of the show, that the problem is if Ann Taylor had to make some sort of motion, which it wasn't sealed, so that kind of tells us if there was a motion in Latah County and it was sealed, then this motion would have been sealed too, right? So there wasn't one. Now, if you guys go out there to the Idaho website and you go through all the documents that are there and you find it, please send it to me. That way we get a greater idea of what's going on. But it's not, to my knowledge, and I've gone through most of that, if not all of it, I didn't see it. They hadn't seen anything like that there. And the mere fact that they had to have some sort of court order referencing his privilege to be allowed to wear street clothing, if it's not in there, and this was some sort of, agreement backstage or behind scenes or whatever the case may have been, the concern is, what else is there an agreement about that's not out there that should be? Because I think that's important. And I think that's important also to the victims' family members. And I think that's mainly the reason why their perspective on this has been very, why they've been upset about this. And I think most people would, if your family member was, taken, especially in the manner that their daughter was, and you're finding out that there's these potential, I don't want to say that there are because I don't know about them, but where did this agreement that he could wear street clothes during pretrial hearings come from? And why did Ann Taylor have to do that here? So if they don't know about it, what happened here? So again, I think that's what a lot of people are missing when it comes to, oh, well, why does it matter what clothes he's wearing? There's more to it. And so for that alone, I think that I am very grateful that this ended up coming out of Judge's hands. And I think that this is going to start moving a lot better and a lot more the way it should be at the end of the day. And like I said, I think when it's all said and done, I don't think he's going to get to wear those clothes, that his street clothes to the hearings anymore. That's just my thoughts. You know, we had listened to a news clip not too long ago, and I think it was our last live that we were at. And on that clip at the end, the reporter stated that they're going to treat him just like any other prisoner. He wasn't going to get anything special. There's no more privileges where he's at. Again, be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. Let's see. Put some stars on there if you guys have any question marks. Or question marks. If you guys have any questions, put some stars. If you have any comments, put some stars. That way I can read your comment. If you're a member, I'll definitely read your comment. Super chats, definitely read those comments. It's depending on what your comment is. If it's one that I think will make sense to me, or not, maybe not some sense, but bring some value to it, then I'll be excited to talk about it. Let's see. Myra Staffa says, do you think testimony and cross-examination of eyewitnesses will make or break this case? No, because eyewitness testimony usually isn't like the most reliable when it comes to things. You know, you can only take so much out of it. Like, you know, for instance, I know that there's been a big contention like, oh, you know, Dylan was drunk, this, that, and the third. She was, you know, she didn't get a good look. It was dark. The guy was wearing a mask. All she saw was eyebrows. But there are a few things that she did see, you know. I'm assuming that if she can see his eyebrows, she probably can see the color of his skin. You know, she's a taller girl. So, you know, height, maybe, you know. I mean, if we go back and look at the Richard Allen case, Richard Allen describes passing in front of 3 females when he entered into that park. 3 juveniles talk about passing a male subject as they walked out of the park at around the same time. So they're both describing the same incident. Yet all 3 of those girls describe maybe different heights, different colors of the clothing and things like that. But there's going to be some things that are consistent, male, you know, Caucasian, those type of things. And so when it comes to what, you know, Dylan and Bethany saw that night, I don't, you know, as long as it doesn't exclude, or, you know, Bryan Kohberger, like, for instance, if they come out and say, you know, the person that I saw had darker skin, then, you know, well, that's a little bit different than what we know, right? From Bryan Kohberger. Or if they come out and say, yeah, you know, he passed by me and he was about 5'4", and he looked to weigh about 190 pounds. And so those things you can kind of point out and say, no, that pretty much excludes him. You know, and with Bethany, I think that what are they going to cross-examine what she heard and saw? The rumor has always been that she saw somebody naked running out of the back, or running out of the house, or whatever the case may have been. And I don't think that, I don't see how that information would make Bryan Kohberger, well, how that would be exculpatory to BK. Give me one sec. So, and the reason why I say this is because Dylan saw this person walk by her from her door. And what she saw is that he walked towards the kitchen. She closed the door and didn't see anything else. Is it possible that Bethany may have also heard some of the commotion, maybe started to creep up the stairs as the person who committed this crime is now in the kitchen? And is it possible that when she started to do that, that person disrobed? I mean, he does have a lack of DNA in his car. And one of the thoughts is that if he wore some sort of jumpsuit, he would have had to have taken it off before he got into his vehicle. And now there's somebody who's saying that there's somebody who has disrobed themselves and they're running out of the house, right? Now, if you go back and you look at some of the pictures that were there of the crime scene through the windows and places, a lot of people pointed out some red liquidy substance drops flinged onto like the cabinets and things like that. Well, if and allegedly Bryan Kohberger had committed this crime and he had a significant amount of blood on his person or on this suit, as he would have taken it off, we have to remember he's probably going pretty quick, right? Wants to get out of there as fast as he possibly can. Is it possible that in that process, from flinging the suit off and getting it off, that maybe perhaps that could have flung some of these droplets of blood on the in the kitchen? And so I just don't see how, even if this person was naked running out of the house, if Ann Taylor is trying to say, well, Dylan saw somebody clothed and Bethany saw somebody without clothes, they're not the same person, and try to make it seem like that person couldn't have taken off his clothes, make that seem like that was an impossibility somehow. It just doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense as it being exculpatory. So when it comes to what they say, probably not. I don't think that it'll make or break the case. I think what'll end up making or breaking the case is just the arguments when it comes to, his location, where he was at. I think the DNA arguments going back and forth as far as what was left on the sheath, not necessarily the IgG argument that the defense has because it's pointless, but the argument that maybe perhaps it's touch DNA, could have gotten there any other way. I do think that when you look at the case in totality, it just makes a lot of sense as far as who committed this crime. You can't, when you look at the entire, the entire case, it makes there makes me no doubt to me anybody else could have committed this crime. I mean, you have, and I'm not going to go through it all, but every piece, and when it comes to like those that disagree and want to argue, they'll usually argue one piece of the puzzle or two pieces of the evidence. They never, put in totality of everything. And I use the analogy that, when you look at this case and you look at it as like a math problem, like one piece of evidence of significance might be equal to a 10 in a math problem. Another piece of evidence of not as much significance could be a 5. And when you have 10, pieces of evidence, you have 10 plus 10 plus 5 plus 5. Then you come out with this 30, right? And I'm saying, hey, this math problem equals 30. Well, Bryan Kohberger fans are coming in saying, no, it doesn't, because 10 plus 5 equals 15. And so I'm not disagreeing with what they're saying, because what they're saying is, oh, his phone could have been turned off by being out there in the middle of nowhere, or, oh, touch DNA can get somewhere else, but they're not including the rest of it, which is what shows you to be 30, which would in effect be Bryan Kohberger in this analogy. And so, and again, it's proof beyond reasonable doubt. It's not proof beyond all doubt. And so what reasonable story could come up when you factor in all of the components of the evidence that would lead you to believe it was somebody else? And if you have to go to the police did it and they're framing him, then you really don't have much of an argument. Okay, let's see. Judge looks like he'll make the stern decisions too. I think so too. I highly think so as well. Let's see. Anybody else has any questions? We'll see what's going on. Let us know. Vincent says, my city can sit and wait, but I'm grateful for what I heard and saw today. Vandals Nation. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Shelley's Stewart says, I have not seen any defendants allowed to appear in street clothes prior to trial. That's the other thing too, right? I think even P. Diddy right now, who's a high profile, super wealthy person, he's not appearing in street clothes for his appearances. I think they have, I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe it was something I saw that was fake, but I could have swore I saw him in a court appearance in a jumpsuit. Could be wrong though, but pretty sure. You know, Richard Allen out there in Delphi, haven't seen him in any type of street clothes. So yeah, you know, and if this is something that requires an order and a judge ruling on, where is it on the first one in Latol? And again, if they're doing those type of things, what else were they agreeing to? So again, I'm super, super pleased that this case is out of that guy's hands. Let's see. Daybell got to wear civilian clothes. I think that was to his actual trial. Well, I don't know about this pre-trial hearings. You know, this isn't an actual trial. This is the pre-trial hearings. There's no jury here. You know, the defense's argument is that if a jury sees, you know, Bryan Kohberger wearing a jumpsuit, that they would come to the pre-conclusion that he's guilty just mainly based on what they see. However, there's no jury here, and you guys wanted to move the case here. I mean, I understood in Latol County because of how small the community was, but you wanted to move it here to Boise, where the community is much larger. You know, this shouldn't be an issue anymore for these pre-trial hearings. So I think that he's going to end up not getting that in his favor. Could be wrong, but I think he may not. So I went through the documents front to back and found nothing requesting that from Ann to Judge John Judge. I can only assume it was a verbal agreement, or it just happened to be with some sealed documents. But if it was sealed and it wasn't allowed to be out there, then she wouldn't have been like, we can't hear something unless it's unsealed, right? And if it was sealed in Latol, it's sealed here. It's just the only thing that happened was the location was moved. Now he had the right, and the judge could have, and they can unseal documents, but if you guys find it, let me know. So the way I see it is, I don't think you can argue about something in a public setting that has previously been sealed. And so if there was some sort of court hearing in order to allow him to wear street clothes, where was it? Where is it? And if it was sealed, then this one would have been sealed. They wouldn't have been able to argue this. It would have been sealed as well. I mean, they would have been able to argue this, but it would have been a sealed argument until it was unsealed, right? Now, and so yeah, I don't think there was one. I think that there was some sort of verbal agreement, and like Brian Enton, who was out there, talked about Bryan Kohberger being handcuffed into court. That this is the first time he had seen something like that, that it hadn't been a thing that was happening in Latol. And again, who made that agreement? To violate the potential safety of the public and of even Bryan Kohberger's own defense attorneys. Because at the end of the day, he's still, there is still significant evidence enough to have charged him for the crimes of 4 murders. A very heinous crime. So it's not like they just plucked him out of thin air and said, hey, you know, it's him. Let's see. Matt says, I love that the judge acknowledged that May is still months away. It seems like he genuinely wants to know what the holdups are, and by the defense instead of just giving them the benefit of the doubt. Well, when he brought up earlier in the court hearing that the theatrics and all this other stuff is not going to fly, I thought that was directed exactly where it was. And you know, I thought it was directed exactly to the defense team. You know, when she brought up motions to compel, he brought up how, well, we're going to do that. You want to do it tomorrow? You want to do it today? When do you want to do it? And he's like, as you can tell, I'm quicker to move these things on. We're not going to wait 14 days. And so I was like, yeah, regardless of, anything, I think that this is exactly what is needed. And truth be told, also, if there's anything that the prosecution's not doing or upholding on their side, well, this judge is going to get that out of them as well, in my opinion. So I'm really liking this judge so far. Let's see. Elizabeth says, I'll give you a hint. Ann Taylor did submit a doc for street clothing. I saw it and I read it. Please send me the link. I think it may have surfaced because Miss Goncalves was upset that he was allowed to be wearing a suit. It wasn't that he's allowed to be wearing a suit. It's because that document doesn't exist. It never has existed. There's a lot of things that people think that they saved just because somebody said, oh, I think that there was a document. And they don't actually go and check, and they just say something like this. I think there was a document. At the end of the day, if it was sealed or taken away or whatever the case may have been, we would be able to see it because it was something that was talked about today in court. And so, no. And if what you're trying to say is you think that this came up because of the arguments that they've had in the past, it's not that. It's the fact that to get street clothing was something that when they discussed with their attorney would have had to have had an order. Now, they may have assumed at that time that order was sealed, right? And when they have today's hearing and they're now have that presented to the court, and now they're talking about it, meaning that it wasn't a sealed order in the past. So it is a potential, behind the scenes verbal agreement. And so, but yeah, if there, I get what you're saying now, that the reason why they're doing it now is because Miss Goncalves may have been making a big deal about it. And that's not the way court works either. They don't just accommodate one person or another and forcing somebody to do something like that. That's not how it flies. Now, if there is something that's being done and it's being done improperly, all right, and is being brought up to the attention, and then all of a sudden we see an appeal or an order, of this, maybe perhaps it's because they knew they did it wrong the first time too. I mean, you can look at this from a different perspective and a bunch of different lights as well. Extreme Blonde comes in with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much. Thanks for all you do, Turkey Time. Yes, thank you. Let me see. Sandy says, Daniel, can you look back a little? I have starred a comment. Yeah, I can do that for you. Sandy Little. Let's see. I'll try to go back a little bit. If not, just ask me again, and I'll be more than happy to do that. Let's see. What? In the local police, they interviewed 6 bazillion. Oh, bazillion. I thought I read something else. I was like, what are you talking about? Bazillion people? He could have been one of them, but why would they interview a student from Washington unless he had a connection in that area? Yeah, exactly. They did interview a lot of people. Even if they if we're assuming that they interviewed him and they were asking about his whereabouts, and that happened much earlier, like during their interviews before they arrested him, I think they would have been able to have easily gathered his DNA at that time, compared it to the DNA on the knife sheath, and boom, you got your man, and you would have had an arrest a lot sooner because the evidence that they had against him at the time still existed earlier on, right? So those videos of his car in Pullman and also in Moscow would have been discovered eventually. The Pullman one's probably a lot sooner because they would have known he was coming out of Pullman. And then the Reddit thing that he had, the interviews, that was already there. That's what they utilized to get his the warrants for his phone ping. So they could have utilized that for the phone pings and could have seen all that other stuff that he was doing. It wouldn't have been very long for them to arrested him, which is common. Once you find somebody and it's pretty concrete, the evidence comes pretty quick. And if so, then you can arrest somebody pretty fast. Most of the times, that's the way it works. Once you find your suspect, now that's usually with cases that are relatively recent, right? Not so much cold cases, but this in the situation where it was less than 2 months when they got his information, or 6 weeks when they figured out who it was. A lot of that evidence still existed, video evidence and stuff like that. Well, anyways, they got his name. I think it was December 19th in the evening or afternoon, and I think they were looking for him by the 20th. That's when Payne went and spoke with the WSU officer who had logged down that he had ran Bryan Kohberger's vehicle as a possible vehicle that was that matched the description that they were out looking for. And I think that alone kind of proves the point that Payne was saying. See, at the time in which they were looking for a 2011 to 13 Hyundai Elantra, this was earlier on in the investigation, probably a lot sooner than a lot of the evidence came in. And so usually when things change, it's because more evidence, more video came in, more angles of the vehicle came in, so you can be a little bit more precise with the more evidence that comes in. At one point, they thought it was a 2019 Sentra, right? Then they thought it was a 2011 Elantra. And then once, in my opinion, they figured out it was Bryan Kohberger, they probably looked at the Pullman ones and saw that, hey, there's the vehicle, it's leaving, and we can trace it from here to there, or whatever the case may have been, and say, yeah, this in fact was a 2014 to 16 in this one here. And then I'm sure as more video came in also in Moscow, they were able to make those determinations. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what they thought in the beginning of the case. If your mind is made day one, you're not if you're an officer, you're not, or a detective, you're not really a good detective. If your mind is made day one, you need to follow the evidence. And as more comes in, hey, it might change your mind. It might go in a different direction. It might go straight. But, if you say no, I'm not going to look at this evidence because it contradicts what I thought day one. That's ridiculous, stupid. Nobody would do that. And then, well, anyways, so what needs to be done is, can the defense go in there today and say that the vehicle that is on camera is not a 2015 Elantra? If they can go in there and say, hey, look, this line here or this, that, there, or whatever the case may have been, isn't consistent with Bryan Kohberger's car, well, then he has a defense. But if they can't, then he doesn't. It's like, all right, you can't exclude this vehicle being yours. So that's where that comes into play. Yeah, please ask that question again. I've gone back up a little bit and I didn't see anything. I don't want to spend too much time, scrolling up. So Sandy Hill, if you don't mind just rewriting it again. Let's see. DB comes in and says, I like what I heard today. The judge made it perfectly clear that he isn't playing around, and deadlines mean deadlines. Yeah, I like that. I liked it a lot too. Thank you, Nina Drew, coming in with a $9.99 super sticker. Thank you so much for that. Let's see. The DNA is the best evidence, in my opinion, coming in from Shelley. Thank you, Shelley. I think it is probably one of the best evidence that they can. Too mad they can't replicate the crime scene. I mean, I think they can. You can replicate the crime scene. And I know a lot of people are upset with the crime scene being torn down and things like that. But what was left of that crime scene was not something that anybody could walk through. I mean, there were some pictures that people had taken from outside when they took down the windows or the boards off the windows. There was floors missing. There was walls missing. Stairs were taken down. You couldn't even walk up to the third floor. Those things were all taken down and processed. So nobody would have been able to have walked in there. Would have been a danger and a hazard to them, not necessarily because of chemicals, but of debris and structure and things of that nature. So I think it plays more to, even if it was up, I'm not sure they would have been able to have gotten in there anyways. And I think they can replicate the crime scene. It's been done many a times. And most, from what I understand, most hearings, I know recency bias plays a huge toll, and everybody thinks of the Alex Murdaugh case and how his jury went out there to go look at everything there. But I think it's kind of rare for juries to go out to a crime scene, to be honest with you. I don't think that I think it's more common for it not to happen than it is for it to happen. Let's see. Wade Wilson wore suits during trial with the orange jail suit to sentencing. Well, that's because he was already convicted at that point. So he is a criminal. He's been convicted, and now sentencing is based on the convicted person. So the thought is on that situation is that if he wears that orange jumpsuit before his conviction, that would persuade a jury to convict him. Well, he's already convicted, and that is the attire for somebody who has been convicted. Let's see. Myra Rostaffa says, your argument is good, but the crime scene is gone and the jurors can't relate to a description testimony. I mean, I get it, but I just don't know very many, I don't think there's been very many instances where jurors have gone out there and try to put that perspective into mind. There are going to be pictures, diagrams. I think there was even a building built, possibly. I don't know. And I think they're going to be able to get that understanding out of those type of things. But at the end of the day, what's the question from having to be there, outside of seeing something very tragic? I'm not sure anybody's going to be able to go in there and see something there that's going to say Bryan Kohberger committed it or didn't commit it. I don't think there would have been something written on the wall in blood saying the killer is this person. So, you're going to be able to see those things. They're going to see the crime scene, and it's going to be disturbing. It's going to be an unfortunate day to have to see those type of things. And I feel for the family members who may be present for that. I'm sure that they may opt to not see those type of things, but yeah, nobody wants to go through that. Let me see. Yeah, that was the most recent one. It just came out like a couple of days ago. The fact that he is not once said he is innocent is very telling. He has been in jail all this time and he's innocent. I don't think so. That's a good point. Let's see. Christina asked me a question as former law enforcement in your experience. Could you educate us on how security protocols are handled in a high court, larger venue versus smaller courthouse in a smaller town? I didn't work as a bailiff or anything like that. I've been to I've only been subpoenaed to one hearing or one trial that was going to start. And in that situation, the only thing I can tell you is that I sat in a room with other officers and other persons who were going to be testifying, and or who weren't allowed to hear what was going on. And at the end of it, the guy pled out and then came in and told us we're free to go. So I really don't know, to be honest with you, like those type of things. If I had to take my best guess, I would assume that in a smaller place versus a larger place, is that there's probably a lot more security presence and law enforcement presence in the larger one. There's probably more, stricter guidelines, given the fact that they probably see higher, crimes of more heinousness, high profile crimes, those type of things. So I think they're more prepared for a larger crowd, larger venue, larger media presence as well. So I do think that, when it comes to like protocols, there's probably going to be some higher ones, which is why I think it was a little bit concerning that when Brian Enton came forward and said that in Latah County, who probably aren't as efficient when it comes to certain protocols as Ada County would be, that they didn't handcuff him, all the way up until, they would uncuff him before he would enter into the courthouse or the courtroom. So, I think it was very early on that we saw him get uncuffed a couple of times. And so, why was that being allowed? And the safety behind that. So, yeah, that's probably the most I can put into there. Let's see. Offender description was a massive part of the PCA arrest affidavit. Yeah, but the PCA is only 10%, and a bunch of that isn't even going to be used. And the reason why it's irrelevant is because there's other evidence that's stronger. Like, for instance, his description was used to get a warrant to look further into him, but his description is not going to be used to maybe necessarily convict him. I'm sure it'll be in there, and the fact that it doesn't exclude him is not going to be, it's just going to be in there. But, like, for instance, his dad's DNA, that was used in the PCA, that was used to get a search warrant to actually get his DNA, and that's not going to be used in trial. There's better evidence than that. The GPS thing versus the cast pings that they're arguing. So I think that there's other evidence that is there. And, just because it was part of the PCA, that part's over with. PCA has been established. Probable cause has been established. Grand jury's already indicted him. It's done with. So now it's the evidence that's against him and what they have found since. Let's see. Some defendants get to wear street clothes in pre-trial. I don't know. I've never seen it. And I also wonder what type of trial is it? Is it a, heinous homicide, or is it like a, an embezzlement, those type of things. But I don't know. I've never seen it, but I'm not all that much, indulged into previous court hearings and things like that. So it's very possible. Let's see. We'll probably do this for a few more minutes, y'all. Let's see. Jeff H says, is it true Bill Thompson offered to give Anne a ride back to Moscow so she could cancel her flight? Just kidding. That's funny, man. That one's funny. Let's see. Never mind, he didn't. Oh. I don't know, I read something about nails. Didn't understand. Yeah, you should ask Judge to come on to the show. I mean, if he's willing to. I'm not sure if he really wants to right now. Now, there's some other things I hear that is stirring up about perhaps how this thing has been handled, but I don't think he'll be coming on anybody's show to talk about anything anytime soon. Let's see. Judge didn't have a clue. Man, I had so much, I thought because he had a cool name that he was going to be like a badass judge. And he was the weakest judge I've ever seen. No offense, man. But you really, you really let the defense just kind of control you around. And, maybe it's probably a lot harder than it looks. So I don't want to, belittle the man's, profession or what he's done in the past or anything like that. But when it comes to this case here, I think it was just a little bit over his head. I think that's probably the best way to say it. Let's see. I'll kind of scroll through these. All right. Idaho case law says defendants have a right to civilian clothes at trial. No case law governs pre-trial. Thank you so much, Afton, for checking into that. That's what I thought too. Daniel Convo with Kimberly Risa, MD. Judge did say BK can't attend the hearing about his clothes since they will be discussing security issues. Right. No, I remember that too. Well, he's going to be talking with his bailiff first. He said that he was going to be talking about it during a, I think it was like a pre-trial hearing, a pre-trial before another pre-trial, and that he was going to talk to the bailiff and to the transport deputies about him, being allowed to wear those type of clothes, and if it, if there's any type of possible threat by it. So, I don't think that the bailiffs and the deputies are going to be like, yeah, man, we totally want him to wear this. I just don't see it. He was a lot smaller than I thought. His suit makes him look a lot broader and bigger. Yeah, maybe. I think he's about 6 foot, right? I know a lot of people were looking at him relative to the other persons that were out there in Latah County, and I don't know how tall those men were. They all looked about. They could have been 5'7", and somebody that's 6 foot is going to tower over them. So it's all about relative and perspective from where you're seeing things. Let's see. Daniel, I noticed BK was looking a little like Ted Bundy with his new scruff in that mugshot. Just saying. Stating. Yeah, I see what you're saying there. Now, do I think that was some sort of intentional thing? I don't know. I don't know. I doubt they give him razors very often, and where he's at, maybe just before trial and stuff like that, so that he can clean himself up. But I don't know. Let's see. Almost done through these. Hey, what's going on? Truth Exposed in the house too. So yeah, just kind of recap everything. There's going to be I think there was an ex parte hearing today, and I think that they ended up we're discussing a few things in reference to the timeline as to when court or the trial should start. Man, I would be excited if they ended up having I'd be excited if they end up having the trial a lot earlier. And this whole tactic of trying to delay really blows up in the face of the defense. This is not true. The PCA is irrelevant because it was suppressed by true bill and grand jury indictment. Bill Thompson said that in a court document. Send me that court document. Let us know where that's at, because that's not true. The reason why the PCA is irrelevant is because that was so probable cause, right? Let me explain something. Probable cause is not, evidence beyond reasonable doubt. It's just enough evidence to say that this person most likely committed this crime. And so when you're looking at evidence of that nature, and you can have some other evidence that is discovered throughout the investigation afterwards, maybe perhaps out of the information that you had to begin with. For instance, like the phone cast stuff. Like, all right, hey, we have the cast stuff. Probable cause affidavit's going to be the bare minimum of information that we need. So that's all we need. And also at that time, they didn't have Kohberger's phone with them. Now, they arrested him. Now they do have his phone, which also has a chip in it. Potentially that chip may have, tracking information or GPS location, stuff like that. I believe Gladiator was mentioned in one of the hearings. And Gladiator should sound familiar if you are familiar with the Murdoch case of how accurate that program can be when it comes to locations. And so when you look at something like the PCA, when it talks relevant, when it talks about cast and, them saying it's irrelevant, there's other information that's stronger and is more accurate than what was put in there, like the DNA from Dad. That makes those things irrelevant. So there was no true bill. If there was a true bill, I believe he would have been released. The mere fact that he's still sitting in jail kind of tells me that there wasn't a true bill. He would have had to have been charged again and gone through the entire process. Because, again, I'm not an attorney, and I don't think I've ever had a true bill on anything that I have arrested on, where I've arrested somebody. I don't think any of those ever went true bill. I know that I've heard of other officers' cases getting true billed, and I think that was when, they grand jury didn't find probable cause or enough probable cause to go forward, and then it was true billed. And so it's been a long time. Also, I mean, last time I was, working in any type of law enforcement capacity was, what year are we? It's well over 10 years, probably closer to 15, if not longer than that. So things also may have changed quite a bit since then too. So that's why I don't claim to be any type of expert whatsoever. All right. Young Thug Rico trial, they were wearing street. Yeah, there's the trial. Yeah, it's not about the trial; it's the pre-trial. So during Bryan Kohberger's actual trial, if it starts in May, yeah, it's within his rights. You don't want to taint the jury there. But we're talking about the pre-trial stuff. And I think the problem is not so much that, but what else did they agree upon that didn't go before court? So, all righty, guys. Well, that's going to do it for me. I want to say thank you to everybody that tuned in. I'm pretty positive I'll end up doing something this weekend. I'm not sure which day. I know I've been a little bit off schedule. This week was supposed to be the last week where it was going to be off schedule. I was going to get to be able to do something a little bit more on schedule starting this upcoming week. I'm hoping that's still the case. I'm waiting on a few things to work out, at my real job, my day job. Been super busy. So if things end up working out one way or the other, I might have some time to end up actually being a little bit more consistent with the time here. So I'll let you guys know there. Please hit that like, subscribe. I know definitely sometime this weekend I will be doing a members only show. So if you're not a member, consider becoming one. I appreciate everybody tonight. I appreciate those that were respectful and on both sides and all sides. Appreciate all you guys. You guys have yourself a great night. Peace out.